In this video, we're going to be going over arrays. Right now, I have an example program up, which by now, if you've caught up with all the previous tutorials I've done, you should understand. It's creating a variable, well, two variables up here, a string variable called user input and a number variable called user num. It's going to print multiples, and then it's going to prompt the user to enter a number, and it's going to store that number as a string inside of our user input variable. We then create a number variable called, we're setting our number variable we created up here, user num, equal to the numerical value inside of the user input variable. So from there we create 11 variables, n0 through n10, and in each of these variables we're multiplying the number the user entered by 0 through 10. Then we output a blank line here. That's just so we have space between like where this prompt was and this text right here, where we're printing output multiples. And then we're going to output our multiples of the number that they entered. So that number times, and actually I just realized something I missed here, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we're going to be outputting the user number. It's going to, like, the text that's going to output is going to say user number times like each of the numbers that we're outputting, the number times, and then equal, and then space, and then we're going to output whatever that is, which we've already done on the math for that up here. And I know this doesn't make sense, but this will go more into why arrays are useful. So let's go ahead and compile this and run it. And so now we'll just say we'll do our number as 5. So now it's going to output all the multiples of 5 from 0 to 10. And we get 0, 5, 10, so on and so forth. So it works. But the reason why I chose an example like this is because this highlights just how much typing you could end up doing if you need to store like a lot of data. So an easier way to avoid doing this is using an array. So we're going to comment out all of this for now. And we are going to create an array is created just like a normal variable is with dim. So we're going to say dim n. But an array will have square brackets with the number of items in the array, which in this case we want to hold the multiples for 0 to 10. So we want 11 items in this array. And this basically, right here, this one line created 11 variables, just like what we had here. So to be able to use the array, we would do like as like the variable name, the opening square bracket, and then selecting the index of the array, or where in the array we want to put a value at. So the first value is going to be 0, and then it goes from there. So 11 items in an array is going to have an index of 0 through 10 because the first index is 0. So we're going to say n0 in this case is going to be what we had before, user num times 0. And I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste for now. And I'm going to show you well, right now it looks like, and right now we are basically doing the same amount of typing we did earlier. And one more. So right now we are doing literally the exact same thing we did, and we haven't saved ourselves any time yet as far as being able to you know, do this a lot faster. We have the exact same example that we had down here, and then we would have to do print all of those variables out too. So right now an array does not seem that useful. We've basically stored these 10 items in our array, and we could do use an array like this, but the whole point of an array is to be able to store a lot of data um, without having to type all of this code. So rather than doing all of this, we can use a for loop, which we learned in the last video. So let's say for I equals 0 to 10. And then inside of each element array, we'll say ni. So remember from the for loop example I gave in the last video, I is going to be like equal to every number from 0 to 10 each time through the loop. So right now I is 0, so we're saying n0 equals, and then we can take this right here, we're going to be doing that same thing. So user num, and then we'll say, instead of, since I is going to be equal from 0 to 10, we could just say user num times I. And next, and this basically replaced all of this typing we did right here with just these 3 lines. And after we get all of our multiples, we can do another for loop to replace all of these print lines we did. So we're still going to need to print our blank line just to have some space between where, and we'll go ahead and print our output multiples line. But now we can start another for loop, and since this I is only like it's created in like for this loop, we can create another variable I, and it's just basically going to create a new variable that is for this loop. So you can use this same variable for your for loops over, as long as those for loops are not within another for loop already using it, which I will be going over in the next video. So if that's a little confusing, don't worry, I'm getting to that. But for now, we're going to say for I equals 0 to 10 again, and we are just going to do print and user num, and then a string where we had say times, but rather than put the number in there directly like we did before, we're going to cut off this and add another part, which I don't think I've covered this enough yet. These semicolons are used to split different items in a print, an output statement. So all of these are going to be output on the same line, but we can use it, for instance, this is a number variable and this is a string, and obviously we can't add them together, so we can just either convert it to a string using the str function and then add them together, or we can just separate it by a semicolon and then add a different data type. So in this case, we're going to say user num and then this space x for time space, and then we'll say I and then another semicolon and then equals, and then we will output our array, our item from our array. So this is gonna say, when I is 0, it's gonna say user num, let's say we entered 5, it'll say 5 times I is currently 0 equals, and then n0, which whatever we stored in n0, which is user num times 0 from up here. And then when I is equal to 1, then all of these numbers will change depending on what values we stored there. And then our next in our for loop, and then compile and run. And we'll do the same thing again, 1 or 5. And then we get the same results with all our same output. But we did it with significantly less code than we did before. And arrays are far more useful than what I'm showing here. And I'm not going to go over a string example, but you already know how to make a string variable. A string array would be the same thing. You would just put a $sign there, and then this is a string array instead of a number array. So with a string array, you'd be able to store like a lot of different strings. Like if you wanted to store like a lot of people's names or something, that would be something a string array would be useful for. And there's going to be lots more uses we find for arrays when we actually get into like videos on building an actual game or simple application. But for now, this is just an introduction. And feel free to play around with this example. Try out a string array and see if you can find any use for that with this example. Maybe have a user enter a bunch of names and then store them in an array and output them. And if you have any questions, go into the forums, ask. If I don't respond, somebody there will. There's quite a few knowledgeable people on the forums, and I will see you in the next video.